I honestly believe that, every entrepreneurial endeavor should be a mere reflection of the founding team or of the entrepreneurs. And to the extent that the founding team does their job in discovering who they are, discovering what their big whys are, getting in touch with who they are and what drives them, then that's going to be reflected onto their projects and onto their businesses. So it becomes like an extension of oneself, and it becomes a life project.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inner Wealth, the Forbes Ignite podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal, CEO of Forbes Ignite. And every week I'll be sharing with you my conversations with unique, creative, and innovative people across all different industries. These are people who are intellectually curious explorers who are also redefining what it means to be successful today. From personal to professional, we cover it all to understand what drives our guests to blaze their own trails and create nimble solutions within the industries that touch each of our lives. Our guest today is Alex Souza, the founder of Pixza and also the co-founder and co-CEO of Wemerang. Pixza helps to fight homelessness through their blue corn pizza restaurants. The majority of people they support can be characterized as being homeless, having educational gaps, a dependency on drugs, refugees, or migrants. Once the people are recruited, they go through a 12-month program where they continuously develop their professional skills and receive support to improve their socio-emotional development and well-being. Alex's newest venture, Wemerang, allows what he calls everyday heroes to create challenges that solve social and environmental problems. We talk about discovering your inner genius to start your own social venture, asking the right questions in entrepreneurship, and so much more. I know you're gonna love what he has to say. Here's our chat. Hey, Alex, how's it going? Thank you so much for being here. It is so wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for the opportunity and for the space and for the invitation. I'm really excited to chat with you a little bit more.
No, absolutely. So I found out about your work through the Stanford Social Innovation Review, and I absolutely had to speak with you. And you've been pretty busy lately. So I wanted to know, what have you been up to lately?
So I have a new startup now, and it's called Wemerang. And I mean, I'm non-operational in Pixza, but as the primary shareholder, I oversee the board. But now I'm fully existential, all into Wemerang, my new startup, and so that's my new project.
And I know that you had a lot of different avenues that led you to where you are today. So tell us about your personal and professional journey.
So, I mean, I think it's really funny because you start connecting the dots when you look back, right? Like Steve Jobs used to say. And my life, I started out, I was living in the US. I was born and raised in Coronado, California. And that really shaped my mindset because it was like a space where everything worked and everything was beautiful and everything was picture perfect. And it sort of gave me this understanding or this worldview that everything was possible. And at the same time, coming from Mexico, right, being born also in Mexico, got an opportunity to, through my mom's perspective, to get a sense of the other reality, right? And from a very young age, she would take me to Mother Teresa's shelters for young children, and I would play with them and just spend a lot of time with them. So that other reality normalized because as children, thankfully and fortunately, we're not judging someone else. We're just observing these differences. And that just, became a part of me, those two pillars, right? The pillar of you can do anything and everything is possible. And the pillar of there's a different reality and there's something that is not the same for everyone. And then I went to Babson and I studied entrepreneurship. And I quickly found myself sort of doubting the status quo in the sense of just doing business for making money's sake. For me, a business had to make money. If not, it wasn't money. But that was like the minimal, that's the core requirement. But there had to be something so much more than that. And for me, it was always about leaving the world better than you found it by improving somebody's quality of life, solving social and environmental problems. And that's how I got into social entrepreneurship. And then I did a lot of adventures and pilots in social entrepreneurship. And when I graduated, the president said, there goes our first social entrepreneur, and this was 2009. It wasn't that long ago, but social entrepreneurship wasn't what it is today. And I just sort of naturally got into that path because of these two philosophical pillars that I had in my upbringing.
I love that. And I love what you said about doubting the status quo, and especially doing that at such a young age. That's unheard of. And I think what you've gone through and what you've experienced from childhood and beyond have really led you to that point. And you mentioned that social entrepreneurship, even from 2009, is very different from what it is today. So what kind of changes have you seen or experienced?
I've seen positive changes in the evolution of not confusing corporate social responsibility with social entrepreneurship, and that's something very positive because it's all based on what you were born to do. And a social entrepreneur or social enterprise is born to solve a social and environmental problem. A traditional company that has corporate social responsibility is not born to solve a social or environmental problem. So I've seen that sort of, I guess, differentiation between those two models. And I've seen it become sort of like not the norm yet, but definitely something sexy, something attractive, something the younger generations are looking up to. Because also, millennials and Gen Zs particularly, they've inherited a world order that really leaves very little space to just do a traditional business. Like social entrepreneurship is right now, it's still a competitive advantage. Maybe it's something that catches people's attention. In a few years, it's going to be the norm. It has to normalize itself as the only way forward because unfortunately, we don't have enough time to solve the issues that we need to solve. And if we don't at least start doing it in the business sense, then, well, there's not much else we can do. And the private sector, and this has been studied very well, the private sector is the sector that has the most opportunity to affect dramatic change. And so that's where we have to act as entrepreneurs. So I've seen a great evolution in terms of understanding it, and also in terms of it being aspirational, of it being something that people want to do, and that people understand that you can do good and be good at the same time. And that sort of status quo shift that's been normalizing. And that's amazing. I think that's very positive.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful. And I 100% agree. And what's so powerful is the need to normalize social entrepreneurship. And that's what's going to move the needle forward. So I definitely agree with you there. Now, the last time we spoke, we spoke about your journey in creating Pixza. And I loved that story. So I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Of course. So that story had like two moments. And both of those were during my grad years at Columbia. I was doing a master's in public administration and development practice. So I'd like switched gears from Babson. I had the tools for being an entrepreneur. And now I wanted to really dive into how you can improve quality of life. And so I was sitting at a bar. That was the moment one with a friend of mine. And we used to think we were doing what Mexicans abroad do, which is really dreaming up about Mexican food because we miss it so much. And we were reminiscing about a traditional Mexican dish that translates into sandal. That's what it's called. And it's made out of blue corn and it's big. It's got all these delicious Mexican ingredients on top. And so the idea of that sandal became bigger in my mind. And I looked at him and I said, it's so weird that there's no such thing as a blue corn pizza. Maybe it's not possible. And I started saying, and instead of it having pepperoni, it should have, grasshoppers and chicharrón prensado and all these other Mexican dishes that were top of mind. And I said, well, and I'm going to call it Pixza because that's how Mexicans refer to pizza. Like they say pizza with an X. and so, it's a perfect Mexican name for the Mexican pizza. And that was it. It was just a conversation amongst friends. And the idea stuck in my mind because I knew that there was something appealing about that, new product offering, a 100% Mexican pizza. And at the same time, I took an elective course at the journalism school. And the professor said, this is a project for the semester. You're going to have to go outside and find somebody who has an incredible story to tell and be that person's shadow, whatever topic. And I'm going to give you guys storytelling tools so that you can tell that person's story throughout the semester. And so that's when the dots connected, right? What I mentioned earlier. At that moment, that early on childhood experience of going to the shelters and normalizing that experience, it came back up and it surfaced. And the voice inside said, find someone that can help you connect to homelessness and that crisis. And as it is in Mexico City, it is in New York. There's a huge homeless crisis, and it's very different though. But I said, all right, I'm going to take advantage of this project and find someone that can give me light, give me entry into that world. So I went out into New York City and I found Joe. And Joe, he was talking to people who were homeless, and I spoke to him and he started talking. He said that he had been living on the streets for 25 years. And when I met him, he was working in one of the many shelters that he was once a beneficiary of. So now he had a job and he was trying to get and help people get off the streets. And so he had this amazing, complete perspective of the crisis as a beneficiary, now as somebody that worked in the environment. And so we became very close friends. And per his suggestion, I spent 2 nights on the streets. I spent 5 nights in the shelter where he worked. And every Friday I would go and I would volunteer in the kitchen and help out. And that allowed me to speak with a lot of different people to really empathize and connect and do this ethnographic research, all in full immersion type of research. And finally, one day, it just, I was walking out of the shelter and I had that idea of pizza in the back of my mind. And I said, well, one day, if I start that pizzeria, I'm just going to hire people like Joe. And that's when it clicked, right? And I didn't have the model. I didn't have all the nuts and bolts yet, but that's when it clicked. And I said, all right, there's something there. And that's how Pixza, the idea of Pixza, was born.
Wow. I love that story. And I know that Joe was an inspiration for you, but who are some of your role models who have really led you in entrepreneurship, for example, and beyond?
One of my strongest role models is my mom. Also, any of these strong leaders that, they're cliche, but for me, I follow them for a different reason. And I say they're cliche because, they're the Mandelas, the Gandhis of the world. These are people that have done an existential all in with their projects. Like there's no way to differentiate them from their project. They are their project. And I think that's very admirable because they're authentic, they're genuine, and they're completely connected with what they're doing. And I really like those because, Mandela, Gandhi, they weren't starting businesses, but they're entrepreneurs in the same sense that they're innovating, and they're innovating with the way they live their own life, connecting that extension. So that's what I love. And that's what I think is very admirable. And I think we need a lot of that authenticity in business as well. Like we see it outside of the business realm, but we don't oftentimes see it in the business realm. And I think it's very inspirational. And at the same time, it inspires us, but also makes it accessible because everybody has an inner genius and everybody, deserves the right to find that inner genius and then to reflect that inner genius on an entrepreneurial endeavor. So that's what I admire the most.
I absolutely love that. And I want to go back to the elective that you took at Columbia. I wish I could have taken that course. It sounds incredibly educational, really inspirational. And you mentioned the use of ethnographic research. Now, when you mentioned the role models that you have, it sounds like they had their own version of ethnographic research that they've done throughout their projects. So I was wondering if you could expand upon that and how you use that to further your work.
Yeah, so that's super important. And, the mixing of anthropological type research into social entrepreneurship, because, it's very sad to see that there's a lot of entrepreneurial ventures, not just social traditional ones, that fail because entrepreneurs assume. And we know that when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And because we think that if it makes sense in our worldview, it's going to make sense in somebody else's worldview. But the world isn't as it is, it's as we see it. So we're by default biased. And so I've seen a lot of great projects fail because nobody asked the beneficiaries if this is what they wanted. They just said, well, because I can analyze your situation and you're worse off than I am, then this is what you need. And because this is what you need, this is what you want. And it doesn't work that way, And so the ethnographic research allows us to really know that we don't have the answers. We as entrepreneurs, we get to ask the right questions. And if we ask the right questions through observation and through literally just asking the question, then they, the beneficiaries for social entrepreneurs, or they, the clients and customers for traditional entrepreneurs, they're the ones that have the answers. And then it's our job to take those answers and put them through our funnel, because thankfully we have had education, we have other experiences, and then together with our funnel and with them, come out with a solution. And that solution is the product or the service that we're going to have. So it's kind of like that process. And a lot of entrepreneurs skip that process. They just go straight to the solution without ever touching base with their beneficiaries or without ever doing all of this research. And so I think it's incredibly important. And, based on what you asked regarding, the people that I admire, there's also this saying that goes on in the PhDs, and they say that research is me-search, right? They're trying to figure out something that's so important to them that they're dedicating their doctorate degree to doing that, right? And so I think the same thing happened with the Mandelas, with the Gandhis, and with all of these types of entrepreneurs. The most important ethnographic research that they've done is existential. It's personal. It's spending enough time with themselves, asking themselves the hard enough questions to come up with these insights, with these big whys, with these passion drivers that then make everything else possible, right? And so it's sort of like this existential research for the entrepreneur, and then this ethnographic beneficiary driven research for coming up with the solution. Those two things have to combine.
I love it. And by using ethnographic research, you're allowing the beneficiaries to design the solution and co-create that with you. And those are the fundamental design 101 factors that I can think of. And I wish more people knew about it. So when you mentioned that, I got really excited. So
it's super important. Yeah. I wish more people knew about that as well.
Exactly. And so you told us about how Pixza was conceptualized. And so tell us about how it was built and how you were able to pivot during the pandemic, and how has Pixza evolved from the time you started the company till now?
So how it was born is, once I graduated and left New York, I had that idea in my mind, but I went to work in Brazil, and I was cooking up the idea in my mind, literally. And then I came back to myself, I was fully decided to start Pixza. And then what I did, the first thing I did was do that ethnographic research, the same thing I did in New York, but now in Mexico, right? Because the population in New York and in Mexico is completely different. And in Mexico, it disproportionately affects young adults. So people are born into homelessness. In the US, people end up in homelessness. It's very different. And so I did that ethnographic research for 4 months. I spent a lot of time talking to experts, spending time in the shelters, talking with beneficiaries, everyone, the same deal, while I was trying to build this model, co-create this model, as you mentioned, with the beneficiary, something that made sense to them. And I spent 6 months putting together the model. And that's when I realized that, they need so much more than just a job. If I just gave them a job, it wouldn't be enough. They need personal and professional life skills, and they need a home and a career path. And so we put together this program that at the beginning, it lasted 18 months. Now it lasts 12. And it's a program, a multi-dimensional empowerment program, where we give them a job. So they're official employees of Pixza. They're living in shelters. They come and they work at the restaurant, official employees, and they have to become branch managers. So the highest level of responsibility, they're managing all the cash, everything, right? That's the first objective. The second objective is social emotional skills development, a very deep social emotional skills development. And we do a lot of multi-dimensional well-being measurement. And the third one is helping them move out of the shelter, move into their own apartment. And so that's kind of like the core program that we've been obviously perfecting and pivoting out throughout these years. And then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic was really, it was really tough for our industry, particularly. And we had to make one call, and that call, we were seeing a lot of our colleagues just laying off everyone, right? It was sort of like the battle to survive was cutting costs. And since we were born to empower people that are very vulnerable, obviously we couldn't just abandon them at the time of their most dire need. So we said, listen, it doesn't matter if we die. It doesn't matter if Pixza goes under. We're going to go under with our mission flag proudly held up high. And we're not going to lay anybody off. And we're going to keep on going. We're going to find other ways to survive, but we're not going to cut costs that way. And so that really rallied everyone. So like that mission first, mission always cry, that really rallied everyone. And we got very creative. And it turned out to be like 2 years of just, the best metaphor I could use is if we were fishing, and we just had 10,000 fishing sticks everywhere trying to see whatever it is that we could grab, right? That was like the pandemic for us. And we grabbed a little bit of here and a little bit there and a little bit there. And that allowed us to navigate and to survive. And now what we did is we basically saw what are all of those creative strategies that we released that actually make sense. And we've pivoted the model, because the traditional brick and mortar model of having pizza shops and having people come to us, that hasn't come back to pre-pandemic levels. And I don't think it will come back. And so we've pivoted to having a retail branch where we sell our pizzas now frozen and sealed airtight in retail spaces. And we're starting to pilot out a social franchising model. And we've also began a project where we help other restaurants be inclusive and empowering spaces like us. So we realized that Pixza had two products that it could sell: our pizzas, but also our empowerment philosophy and curriculum. And so we're sort of licensing that out and allowing other, professional spaces to hire vulnerable young adults like us and have all the tools that we use so that they can make sure that they're very successful employees as well. So that's sort of like the next stage in Pixza.
That is absolutely brilliant. And I think it's really important that even during the pandemic, you made the tough decision to not lay off people in order to cut costs. I think that was really important to do, because we're human first. And it seems from the entire business model that you've created, you're putting humans first and their needs first. And I want to go back to the curriculum and the program that you developed that lasts about 12 months. What are some of the most exciting or your favorite success stories that you can tell us?
So there's so many, fortunately. So we have a story of a young adult because we focus on young adults that are age 17 to 27. So that's like our main focus bracket. And so I think he was 18 or he was under 20. I can't remember the exact age. And he was still living on the streets, right? And he was living on the streets because of his girlfriend that wouldn't or couldn't leave the street situation. So we literally have pictures of, it wasn't even a mattress. It was just cardboard boxes in a corner in a street. And that's where by choice he was living, because part of our program is you have to be in a shelter so that we know that at least you have food and you have a roof on top of your head. But he wanted to be there because of his girlfriend. And so we saw him start in that situation and then graduate from our program with his own apartment, right? And that's a transition and an evolution that is super intense and super amazing to make in just 12 months. Imagine going from the street to your own apartment. He bypassed the shelter completely. And, it's those types of stories. We have another story of somebody that graduated from our program that now is a manager at a Subway, another one that is a manager at a hotel branch. And so all of these kids, what they do is that they take a vote of confidence in themselves. They're used to the world, society, everyone just shunning them out and not trusting them. And now Pixza comes along and says, you're worthy, you're good enough. I loved what you said because it is human first. And because I trust you, now you can trust yourself, right? And so they go through this transformational program and they end up with these tools to not only have their own apartments, but to be able to have a career and continue on from that level, right? Because now they're earning, it's at least 60% above the minimum wage here in Mexico. And they have a career and they have a year behind them and a seal of approval from Pixza that says they work magnificently well and you can trust them. So those are the stories. And it's incredible to see that resilience and that opportunity to make such dramatic changes in just 12 months. Like you think about it in just us, how many transformational experiences do we have in 12 months? And not that many, it's something very incredible to witness.
Yeah, that is incredible. And it all boils down to that fundamental trust in others and trust in yourself is most important as well. And I feel like when you instill that level of trust in yourself, you can do anything. It yes. Sounds very cliche, but
it's very really true. That. Yes. I'd say, the most, and this is, we realized this like years after doing what we did. And we realized this because a professor was, doing a case study on us and he said, I think this is the most important thing that you guys do at Pixza. And he said, it's a relational transaction and intervention where it's not the program, it's not the curriculum. It's the fact that one human chose to trust another human. And because these are kids that have to have at least 2 of these 6 characteristics to be a part of our program. They have to have lived on the streets, have a criminal record, be abandoned by their family members, have no formal education, have a history of drug abuse, and be migrants, refugees, and or deported. So you look at those 6 characteristics, most of them have 4 out of those 6, and you say, well, they're going to steal from me. They're going to come high. They're never going to make it to the job on time. Like all of these, ideas, preconceived notions that we have. And when you break those all down, you hack them by just trusting them. And it, as you said, it's much easier said than done. And it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's so transformational. You give them the opportunity to trust in themselves. And that's the birth of empowerment.
Speaking of transformational, I know that after you left the daily operations of Pixza, you started and now you're leading Wemerang. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Wemerang, yeah.
Tell us more about that and what led you to starting Wemerang?
So Wemerang is an awesome project I have the privilege of co-founding now. And this project was born, the idea was born 4 years ago when I got married. I married an everyday hero. And my wife is someone whose hobby is rescuing animals. So she loves rescuing animals and I had never rescued a dog. And now we lead a community of 200 everyday heroes just like us that do dog rescues. And in addition, they do beach cleanups, park cleanups. We deliver, we do food drives. We deliver clothes to people that need them. We visit the elderly at shelters. We give toys to children in orphanages, all of these different causes. And I started meeting these amazing people. And I started asking myself, well, how many more people are there like us? People whose hobby is to just solve social environmental problems, right? And so I did some research and I found an amazing study done by the UN Global Volunteers Program, which is the only entity that has this global reach to do this analysis at such a world stage level. And according to them, in the world, there's 1 billion volunteers, and 30% of them are formal volunteers. Those are the volunteers that we are used to knowing about, the citizens, the employees, or the students that get mobilized by a formal NGO or foundation to do some volunteering work. And you get school credit, or you get it's a very formal transaction, right? But 70% or 700 million are what the UN calls informal volunteers, and what we call everyday heroes, which is just people leading their own grassroots actions to try and solve social environmental problems. And they do it against all odds. They pay for everything themselves. They battle to mobilize help and resources. There's no platform designed for them. It's all informal, right? And they all act in the dark. And so I looked at that and I'm like, wow, we're all over the place. And I got tired of looking for a platform that understood us and that gave us the tools that we needed. So I decided to build it. And that's what Wemerang is. It's a custom built one-stop shop for anybody that wants to solve social environmental problems their way, so that they can easily mobilize and monetize, so that they can make money and they can make a business out of solving social and environmental problems. And that's very exciting, because right now we're seeing all these platforms that enable people with diverse talents to monetize them. You have informal content creators monetizing on Patreon. You have influencers galore monetizing on all these different platforms. And I mean, in my opinion, there's no better talent than solving social environmental problems. And so that talent must be monetized, and we must normalize that, because that way we can do so much more. So Wemerang helps anyone basically create their own challenges, mobilize their community, friends, family members to complete them, earn points, recognition, celebration, and money, so that they can do so much more.
That's incredible. So I love what you said about, and I know I said this in the last conversation we had, you got tired of searching for a platform that did all these things. So you created it yourself. You are the poster child of social entrepreneurship, honestly.
That's, need creates opportunity and the ideas. And that's what ends up happening. I mean, and I think that's how a lot of innovations take off, right? There's a lot of energy that goes in complaining. And if you can repurpose that energy in just creating, then that's what happens,
Exactly. Can you tell us some stories about Wemerang and what has developed as a consequence of starting at Wemerang and developing their own initiative?
Yes. So, it's very disruptive in the sense that we're democratizing this opportunity for anyone to be able to be an everyday hero. There's a lot of these cool generational trends that are pushing the world into Wemerang's favor. The fact that there's more awareness in general, there's more pressure on companies to do good, and there's a lot less time to tackle these social environmental problems. As I mentioned, I think Gen Zs are practically born as everyday heroes because of the world that they've inherited. We see Greta Thunberg, and she's like mobilizing crowds and millions of people to do these things. And what we want to do is we want to give these people tools and a voice. And we've seen that. We just barely launched our app 2 weeks ago. And we're seeing all of these people come up and download the app and start mobilizing and creating their own challenges to solve whatever social environmental problem or cause they're passionate about, and in their own way. So what's disruptive is that, before Wemerang, you had to kind of wait to see if an NGO or a foundation posted an opportunity that you were interested in, and if the day and time matched your schedule, and if it was cool. But you couldn't do anything yourself, right? At least not on that platform. You had to go and do it informally. So now you can do it. And so everybody, a company, a person, organization, whoever wants to lead change, they have an app custom made for them so that they could easily create a challenge, easily mobilize people, and monetize by charging these challenge entry fees to share costs, and also by receiving peer-to-peer donations. So, we have a very cool reforestation happening on August 6th, and this is led by Maria. And Maria is 24 years old, and it's for 500 people. Imagine that. It's 500 people that she's mobilizing to do reforestation. And, now it's sort of evolved to entertainment with purpose, because she's doing yoga in the morning, and then you go and you do the reforestation, and then you have beers and music in the afternoon. So it's like a full day of just having fun, doing good. And we're going to see that normalizing. And I think Wemerang is going to become a new type of entertainment. It's going to compete with going to the movies, with going to a party. We're going to make it cool, sexy, attractive, easy for anyone to want to be an everyday hero, because you can make money off of it, and because there's nothing better than doing altruistic initiatives. You feel better, obviously.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the analogy you made, much like how, and a lot of people don't realize this, TikTok is a direct competitor of Netflix because of the attention spans that have to be divided among different services, different forms of entertainment. And Wemerang is going to be their own unique form of entertainment that includes a lot of not just philanthropy, but it's a lot of fun as well. It involves a lot of people's passions. And it's not just passion projects anymore. People can actually monetize off this and do this full time if they wanted to. So
yes,
I think that's really powerful.
It's a creator economy at the end of the day. It's a creator economy for everyday heroes so that they can build their own individual tech-enabled businesses to monetize their hobby and to make an income doing what they love. So, they're doing this already and they're doing this at a deficit, which means imagine the amount of passion that you need to have to do this despite all of these challenges because you want to leave the world better than you found it. Now, you're not going to do it for the money, no, but the money is going to help you do a lot more. It's going to help us also make sure that we create healthy and positive role models that are accessible and that are real and honest and authentic. Wemerang is gonna help prove to the world that you can make a living off of solving social and environmental problems, and that you can be very cool by solving social and environmental problems. And those are the new types of influencers that we really want to celebrate and recognize and give the spotlight to.
Yeah, I love that mission. And so for those who are interested in learning more about Wemerang and getting involved, how can they do so?
So you can download the Wemerang app right now is live from Canada all the way to Argentina, so in this part of the world. And you can download the app and you can start creating your own challenges, start joining other people's challenges. It's a soft launch right now, so we're getting started, but it's basically that's the best way to do this. Unleash that inner hero inside you and use the app to just mobilize your friends and do something good for the planet, people, and animals. And I promise you're going to feel a lot better with yourself. And that Friday or that Monday, that's going to turn into an epic day because you chose to do something for someone else.
That sounds incredible. And what advice would you give some aspiring social entrepreneurs who are listening right now?
So, I think the most important piece of advice is make sure you're doing things out of consciousness and awareness and not out of inertia. And that's something very difficult to break because we're always molded into this inertia type of status quo and movement. We seldomly ask ourselves why we're doing things. So I'd say find those big whys. Take enough time and prioritize self-discovery. Take some time, travel by yourself, get out of your comfort zone, do things that you wouldn't usually do so that you let that inner genius flourish and that you understand why you're doing things. And then once you know why you're doing something, then definitely find a team, collaborate with people, and structure the business model to get it done, right? But you're putting structure to passion. Don't start with structure and then try and instill passion into structure. So find your big why, get a chance to know who you are, and do everything out of awareness and consciousness. The road will be easier because at the end of the day, the road is not easy at all. So you need to have that big why.
That is really, really good, wonderful advice. I couldn't have said that better myself. So I asked this question to every single one of my guests on a podcast. So how do you define success?
That's a great question. I think success for me is well-being, and well-being is multidimensional. So success is having all of the pillars in your life harmoniously aligned. They're not always going to be aligned at the same level. And that's why sometimes some are better aligned than others and it kind of pulls up the rest. But, the multidimensional result of all of these different pillars in your life, so you can look at them and you're like, okay, they give me well-being and they allow me to therefore serve myself, serve others, serve beneficiaries, customers from the best state that I can be in. So success for me is the harmonious alignment of all the essential pillars in your life so that you can have multidimensional well-being.
Wow. That is extremely powerful. So many great sound bites from this podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. I really enjoyed our conversation, and thanks to the crowd, to the people that are listening for coming on this journey with us.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. And please keep us updated on your progress. We'd love to hear more about Wemerang, about Pixza, and possibly your next venture after that. So
definitely will.
Wonderful conversation. So can't wait to do it again soon.
Yes, looking forward to it. Thank you, Nicole.
That's it for this week's episode of Inner Wealth. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and that you'll join us next week as we continue to explore all the ways success is being redefined in our ever-changing world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite podcast app, and follow us on Instagram at Forbes Ignite for more thought-provoking content and opportunities to engage with us. I'm your host, Nicole Cacal. Thanks for joining us.